Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And after weeks of debate about Europe, the net result, according to one poll out today, is that more people than ever are undecided about which way to vote. So the more people hear from both sides, the less clear everything is. Imagine that.
Let's have the facts and the figures in front of us as we all make this huge decision on the 23rd of June. And Britain would be worse off by £4,300 per household. Britain would be poorer by £4,300 per household. £4,300 worse off every year. Families would face that £4,300 cost to the country per household if we left. The analysis shows that Britain would be permanently poorer off, equivalent to that £4,300 per household.
No, these are not facts. These are forecasts. This is like when the Chancellor stands up at the budget dispatch box and forecasts what's going to happen in the economy. He's nearly always wrong, by the way.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for coming today.
That Bernard Jenkin, he loves you. Sorry, that was the gentleman at the end there who's a Brexiteer on the Tory backbenches. Now, let's start with the important thing. Let's have the equation back up there. You want to talk us through this?
Yeah, well, that's a gravity model, a regression gravity model with a general equilibrium NIGEN model for the economy. OBS.
OK, yeah, good. Well, yeah, that was clear to the rest of us. So let's cut to the quick...
got an error just in the last line.
Okay.
I'll tell you what
there's always one very, very clever member of the class who can actually catch out the teacher.
I'll tell you what, I mean, look, what it does is it tries to work out, if you leave the EU, by how much does your trade and your investment go down? And then it says, well, what does that mean for the prosperity of the country? And that's how we come up with the £4,300 number per household. And in the end, the country is only as rich as all the people in the country. And if the country trades less and it has less investment, then the country will be poor and have less to spend on public services.
Okay.
And one of the things we prove there is that if you don't have all that money coming into the country, you don't have as much money for public services, and either you have a big hole in your public finances, or you have to put income tax up by 8 pence. So, these are real facts people need to consider before they vote.
But in all honesty, it's total nonsense, isn't it? In this way, in that you heard Bernard Jenkin there talking about your forecasts. Yeah. Now, you and I both know, because I've sat through an awful lot of your budgets, that somewhat nerve-shreddingly forecasts go up and down. And that's on, as Donald Rumsfeld even might say, on known knowns. You're speculating right up to 2030 here on total unknowns, and then turning it into a specific household figure, which seems to me, at the very least, I mean, would you concede it's very speculative at the very least?
No, we gave a range of numbers, and then we took these and said that's the central number, that's the one in the middle. But we gave a whole range, depending on the scenario that Britain would find itself in if it left. But, let's be absolutely clear. Britain would be poorer, families would be poorer, and that is not just my view. Right? That is the view of the many, many economists who have spoken today. The Bank of England has talked about the financial consequences. The International Monetary Fund has talked about the consequences. You cannot name a single friend of this country, a single ally, a single trading partner, a single international financial institution who thinks that leaving the EU would be good for Britain. Now, you can make an argument which is, I don't mind about the economic cost. That's a price worth paying because I think there are other things that come if we leave. But don't pretend that the economy won't suffer. I would say that would lead to a more honest debate we can have in this country over the next couple of months about the costs and benefits of being in the EU. But the overwhelming evidence from lots of people who haven't got a dog in this fight is that if we leave, Britain will be poorer, families will be poor, and I don't think that is a price worth
Okay,
paying.
there's lots in that. Maybe we'll pitch in, but Alison, you first. Are you convinced by the Chancellor's equation today and the analysis that goes with it?
I am certainly not convinced, and I think that George on the radio this morning described people like me as economically illiterate. Is that what I am?
No, it was not I would never describe you, Alison.
No. I say I probably am economically illiterate, but I felt that we had a dodgy dossier from a government got us into the Iraq War, and I think this is a dodgy dossier persuading us to stay in the EU. I don't understand all the economic fine points, but as far as I can work out, GDP and household income have been conflated. This figure of 4,300 is going to be taken away from individual households. That's an awful lot of money. People are very worried about it. But if you look at it, that isn't a real figure. That is not a real figure. It will be the Treasury's predictions, as we know, be lucky to get them accurate for 14 months, never mind 14 years. But people are not going to have £4,300 taken away from them in 2030. And the other thing I feel so strongly about is that it's all about economics. It's about us being economically illiterate. But what about primary school places? We've seen today we haven't got enough primary school places. We've got this mass migration, people coming in. We've got hospitals under strain. We've got maternity units turning away pregnant women in labour. And this is because George's figures do not take into account the fact that we will continue to be allowing 200,000 or 300,000 people a year into this country until 2030.
Okay, can I just ask you one very specific question on that? George has been making the point about economic experts and friends. We've had the IMF, we've had a lot of others. And this seems to be almost what the debate, this is the central point of the debate. Do you concede that one way or another we would be worse off, or at least that most experts do think we would be worse off if we left? That may be a price worth paying, but do you concede that from the evidence you've seen, that is probably true, regardless of the figures today?
I think in the short term it might be quite small. I do not think it'll be £4,300 a household. I think it might be £1,000 a household. But what we have got to think about in our country is about communities and quality of life. It's not all about money. It's not all about economics.
Can I just pick Alison up on that? You know, we were talking about the national living wage. You know, someone on the national living wage is earning £13,000 a year or so. Let's use your number, 1,000. That's a £1,000 hit to their income when they're only earning £13,000.
Yes, but they can't.
And what do we think is going to happen on June the 24th if this country votes to leave? You can take the long-term projections, which we've given you today, but all the evidence from all the people like the Bank of England, the international financial institutions like the IMF, is that on the 24th of June, if we vote to leave, there will be a severe economic shock. And I can tell you, it will not in the end be, the people on the panel who pay the heaviest price. It will be the people in the low-paid jobs, the people who are on the margins of the labour market.
But I'm talking...
They suffer when companies, fail and companies can't export and you don't get investment into this country. They'll pay the heaviest price.
I need to bring in Grace and Martin here. Okay. Do you believe the Chancellor's figures?
Well, I consider myself a kind of shy and easily terrified Brexiteer. So I listen to all these things that you say and I take them all on board. Today, I really looked at that and I thought, so if you're saying that normal working class families will lose the best part of £5,000, that would cripple most families. And I'm thinking, so why are we even having a referendum?
That's another question, but a good question.
Today I'm thinking, why are we letting the British public, if it's so dire and this is so awful, why are we letting the British public vote on this? We're the people that, vote for Boaty McVoteface. Maybe we're not really meant to, and I'm being flippant, but it does seem like this is very, very scary and it's scaremongering, and I can't quite believe. No. I don't believe it because I can't quite believe that we would be having a referendum if things were so dire.
Martin.
It's a hypothesis, and it's a legitimate hypothesis, but it is just one potential outcome of something that is a very long time away. And I am asked constantly at the moment, what are the real facts if we leave the European Union? And I've scarily been in polls that tell me more people will believe me on this than anybody else. And I have to tell you, I'm being very careful about what I say on it. I think the only thing that we do know is that there is a greater risk if we leave than if we stay. Now, before you see that as a particular negative, I use risk in its true sense, which means there is a much greater variance of outcomes if we leave than if we stay. Now, with George's scenario, which is plausible, I'm not saying it will happen, that's a different thing, then the economy could be in a very bad state. There is also the opportunity that we become a nimble tiger economy operating outside the European Union and we work in a very good state. There is less risk if we stay. It's not without risk. If we stay, we have much more certainty. So I think what people need to do to make up their own minds is first of all decide their own European Union politics. Then look at whether they are risk averse or not. If you think it couldn't get any worse, you probably want to vote to leave. If you don't want to take a risk it could get any worse, you probably want to vote to stay. There's a reason Project Fear, as they call it, works. It's because there is a greater risk in leaving. And then go with your gut instinct. And that is all we can do. Anyone who tells you they know what will happen if we leave is a liar, whether they're saying it'll be great or it'll be awful. There's a huge variance. And none of us truly know. There are no facts.
Okay, can I just hone in on one thing? I mentioned it a moment ago. You have the IMF, you have many other economic bodies predicting that there will be uncertainty and that uncertainty will cost us and will in the end cost jobs. Do you believe, on the balance of probability, that that is true or not?
In the short term, I do think we'll have an economic shock, but we shouldn't decide this over the short term. This is our one-off opportunity to decide what we want for the future, and we should look at the long term. You asked me on balance of probability. If you ask me as a personal view on balance of probability, which, just to be really clear on terms, mean is it more or less likely than 50%, I would say on balance of probability, it is more likely we will have less money in our pockets if we vote to leave. But that doesn't mean it will happen. It could still go the other way. That isn't fence sitting. That's the truth. That if you ask me what happens, if I meet somebody and I fall in love with them and I want to marry them, I can never know if they really are the one for me. I just have to do it on what I base and what I think. I hope they're the one. But we live in an uncertain world and we have to embrace the uncertainty in this one. We don't have facts. That's the most important message I can give everyone. There are no facts of what will happen if we leave.
Can I
don't know.
Can I just put Grace's point to you, George, which is, if it's so terrible, the potential downside of leaving, why did you have the referendum in the first place? And indeed, do you think now that you were right to do so?
Oh, I think it's absolutely right. This is such a big question for our country. It's been hanging over our country, certainly all my adult lifetime. And I think the British people are perfectly capable of making this decision and weighing up the consequences. There are lots of positive reasons to remain in the EU. We haven't talked about the risks out there in the world and whether it's really sensible for the West to start to break up and Britain to go it alone. But even on the economic front, I mean, you know, Martin says there would be an economic shock in the short term. He's reasonably, certain of that, even if he says, you're not. Right. Now, what does an economic shock mean? It means people are fired from their job. It means their homes are repossessed. It means, their aspirations for life are taken away from them. Not the whole population, but potentially very large numbers of people. And you've got to ask yourself, is that a price worth paying for whatever else it is you want to achieve? And the idea that Britain can be...
Why run that risk at all? Why ask the question if that's what you wholeheartedly and firmly believe?
Because I firmly also believe in our democracy and in the people in this room and the people watching this programme, all of whom have got an equal vote to me in this decision, that they should make this decision. And that is, by the way, sovereignty. There's a lot of debate about sovereignty. This is a supreme act of sovereignty. Anyone who says we've lost our sovereignty in the European Union, think about the decision we are being asked to take, all of us. That is an act of sovereignty. But I think cutting ourselves off from our neighbours, withdrawing from the world, that is not who Britain is. It's never been Great Britain. It's not been our history. And by the way, every time we've tried it, it's been a total disaster, not just for Europe, but for ourselves.
Can I just ask Alison and Grace briefly then? Alison, maybe you first. You've both said that you're interested in the Brexit argument. One of the biggest questions is whether when we get to the end of this process, if we vote to go, whether we will really be able to get rid of freedom of movement or whether that will be the price of any kind of trade deal. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I hope it isn't. And I think that George is just saying, making this case. I don't think making a positive case for the EU is saying you're all going to, scary, you're all going to lose £4,300. I actually think that the free movement of people is not only endangering our security, I think it is taking jobs from our young people. It is putting enormous pressure on our services. Theresa May said at the last Tory conference, we will have to create 900,000 school places by 2024. Our classrooms are already overcrowded. By 2030, this is the great date that the Treasury's picked out, we'll be having another 3 million people coming into this country. Does anybody think we've got room for another 3 million people with our services and our hospitals under tremendous pressure? So I feel very, very strongly that nobody in the Remain camp is talking about what are we going to be doing about hundreds of thousands of people coming in. How are we going to be, when we can't even fund our hospitals or our schools or give our old people dignity in old age now? How is that going to happen?
I've been